All right, here we are. I'm Christine McKellar, local Vegas author, blogger, former producer of That So Vegas TV show. And I'm here with a good colleague and friend, Jeff Burbank. I'm going to let Jeff tell you a little bit about himself, and then we're going to explain to you why we're sitting here doing this.
Well, I've been mostly a journalist over the years, kind of a jack of all trades too, but an author. I've written 5 books, and I guess most of my background has been writing about police, fire, and general assignment. I've also written many magazine stories as well. So
And gambling.
and gambling. I covered the Gaming Control Board and with the Las Vegas Review Journal and Las Vegas Sun. So most of my career has been in Las Vegas, but I've also worked in Los Angeles, Washington D.C., and the San Francisco Bay Area.
And also, one of my favorite books of yours is License to Steal. That was pretty much Vegas gambling, gaming industry related.
Mm-hmm. Right. So when I covered the Gaming Board and the Gaming Commission for the Las Vegas Sun, there were a lot of really interesting issues before the board, not like now. Back then in the late 80s, early 90s, there were a lot of really interesting stories. Mm-hmm. And so I was thinking, boy, covering these, writing a lot of stories about them, I should write a book about them and, a chapter on each one of these, long stories about slot machines and about cheating at gambling and that kind of thing. So,
wow.
So I was able to put together a book that was published by the University of Nevada Press.
Excellent. Yeah, it was, again, one of my favorites of yours, but we could do a whole episode on that, if we unpack that. But
sure.
Let's start with actually what we're aiming for here. And I'm kind of glancing at my notes here because I kind of have to, but we were thinking of trying to address what baby boomers like us, how we've morphed and how we deal with, look at what we've all been through since what? I mean, just the revolution of computers and social media, fashions, idioms, slang words. There's just a whole wealth. Like we went from far out, bitch and groovy and all that, to now they say something sick. I still don't get that one. And rad, but rad's cool.
I think rad goes back to the 50s, actually.
Yeah, it's survivable. Although I found myself dating myself, I've gotten to a checkout and there's some youngster, which now to me they're youngsters. That would be what? Are they the Gen X? My son, he's a millennial.
Well, there's Gen Z. My daughter is in her mid-20s, so she's a Gen Z.
And Matt's in his mid-30s, so
he's a millennial.
Yeah. Boy, I'm glad you got that dialed. Yeah. So, yeah, there's just a lot we can cover. Not only that, it isn't about just how we've morphed over the decades and how those of us, and we are boomers, we got to see quite a bit. Nothing like what our parents did, but we've been through a lot.
Oh, sure. I mean, and it's been said before, but boomers, I was born in December 55. So we were the first TV generation where just TV was just all encompassing for all of us, our entire lives.
Excellent.
And, and then subsequent generations, it was computers. But I mean, I used to mention to people that, do you remember in the 70s, especially in high school, you had the telephone and the telephone book, and that was it. and it was a wired telephone. Or it was at home or
a payphone
or a friend's house.
But had to have a dime. Well, it was a nickel, dime, and then a quarter.
Right. Sure. And so and we survived fine. I mean, and the other thing was farther into the 70s when the 60s sexual attitudes changed a lot, and then by the 70s it was pretty much mainstream, right. And then so was drug abuse and that kind of thing. But
the free love, the hippie thing, that was mid 60s.
Yeah, right.
And then that's a topic that we definitely should be discussing today. Is how that whole attitude towards sex. I was talking, like I said earlier, to a receptionist at the club, and somehow the topic came up, and I'd read an article that, uh, contrary to what we might think, the younger generation isn't having sex like they used to. They're not getting married. I just pulled up some statistics that, for Gen X, that was those born 1965 to 1980, in the 70s, 6% of them said they had not had a sex partner since they were 18.
Hmm.
Um, and I kind of think that that's a low number when you jump forward to millenniums, Generation Y, where 15%, it jumps up to 15% have had no sex partners since age 18.
And you wouldn't think that it would be like that.
You think it'd be the reverse.
Right.
Free love, and then condoms and contraceptives and
right. And then there was, of course, there were the AIDS era, and people
HIV,
people being extra careful not to get pregnant. Maybe that's part of it. But I mean, maybe it's things have come kind of full circle. It used to be that you waited to get married to have sex,
right?
And that was a kind of almost a desperate thing, like that Frank Sinatra's song "Ring a Ding Ding," where he says, "You go to that small hotel, and it's like, yeah, okay, wow, we just got married. Let's do it real fast. Let's just get married and go into that small hotel." And then I think it was about the mid '60s when two college students got together, and I think it was in the Midwest, and they were living together, and it became a national story. I think it was about 64, 65. Oh, isn't this
out of wedlock?
Isn't this crazy? These two people, and it was like a wire service story, went national.
Right. Oh yeah, yes, yeah. But that brought in too, I remember, like, the mothers were panicking, telling their daughters, remember the thing about, why pay for the cow if you get the milk for free? They would try everything to get you to get that ring on your finger. I wonder too, it was stability and everything, but then maybe subconsciously too, it was parents didn't want their daughters to get pregnant and bring a child into the world that didn't have stability in a traditional family. The fear of pregnancy, I think, was the backbone of the morality. Don't you think?
Well, and sure, and the viewpoint that a guy just wants one thing, and he'll be irresponsible and ejaculate into a woman he is not sure if she's fertile or whatever, and then leave, and then now she's pregnant. Right. I mean, it's just, so you've got to avoid that at all costs. And of course, the pill came out in the early '60s, right. But I mean, that was by prescription. It wasn't necessarily available to younger women.
Right. Although now they're handed out like candy.
Well, sure. Sure. And so, and all those, I remember all those, I imagine you remember too, even when you were a kid, all those movies that came out in the '60s. It really started in the late '50s, but that were just hinting about sex, and then it was just women in bikinis and gals in the mini skirts. That was the big craze, and then you'd see that on TV too. So
and also the women were always catering to the men in those movies.
Sure,
it was an obvious.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, it was.
It was absolutely a male's word.
Yeah, male's dominant. But the women were doing their utmost to be the most attractive and the.
Right.
To attract the men, and
right. And then also, but that was also about women being free. Like, well,
right.
Don't tell me what to do. Don't get rid of these Puritan viewpoints. I can have I can have sex with who I want.
Twiggy and mini skirts and things like that, and the see-through bathing suit. I remember that.
And I was just a kid, and I thought that was really, I don't know. I thought that was racy, but I also thought it was pretty hot, even though I was only 12 or 13. I remember I remember it was Nancy Sinatra. I was such a huge crush on her when she had those
white boots.
Yeah, right. And the mini skirt, the mini skirt,
and fishnet stockings. Those were a big turn on. Guys just loved them.
Oh, sure. And then it evolved into halter tops
and hip huggers. I'm guilty.
And then you remember also there was that era, lasted about 1 or 2 years, where women went braless.
Yeah.
And so you'd be at the grocery store and your eyes would bug out because there's this woman and you could see the outlines of her nipples
Of course,
there.
especially
And
if
that
she was in the frozen food department.
Oh,
You
and
were
that
like,
was
ma'am, don't you need some frozen peas?
and it was known because that was such a turn on for men.
Uh-huh.
I mean, in mini skirts too. So
well, it even got oh boy, we haven't even gotten to where we were going to go, but it's like too. I remember when and this wasn't too long ago. Was it 10? Well, listen to me, too long ago, 10, 15 years, but when they came out with nipples in bras, so that you could wear a bra, but it would have a nipple on it, a fake nipples, so you could still look like you were nipply. But
okay. So now, see, I didn't know about that.
Well,
so I just heard
did.
about that now. The women did, yes.
Yeah.
Well, then in the 50s there was the push-up bra, and then Marilyn Monroe used those ones with the.
And then Madonna had the.
Yeah, right. She made it like a comical kind of thing.
Yeah. Oh, this could bring to mind then that the progression of back from the staid 50s, so to speak. Although, isn't that when the rockers came out and they were shocking the parents? Because, like Elvis, they were gyrating their hips and
that
making all the tight jeans. And,
right, where they would not allow Elvis's. They called him Elvis pelvis because they would not allow his gyrating pelvis to be on TV.
Right.
They covered that up.
Kind of reminds me of American Bandstand and stuff like that, right? Wow. So back to this percentage of, okay, so we've gone basically from the state, let's say 50s, it was pretty still contained. And then the Elvises came in. And then, as you said, the progression in the 60s and the hippies and the free love thing for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But there was not a lot of available contraceptives, as you aptly pointed out, for public consumption.
Well, the condom has been around since, I don't know, the 20s or something like that.
No, I think it's been around for centuries.
Maybe more than that.
I've read horror stories about what they used.
Right. The ones made of lambskin or whatever.
Yeah, but women had diaphragms back in the 2,000 years ago.
Oh, okay. That's
similar
there
thing,
you go.
I think.
There you go. But I was just thinking about, I just thought about the time when you could go to a drugstore and they would ask for a prophylactic.
Oh, it was so embarrassing for you guys.
Well, right. Remember that movie Summer 42 when the guy had to go to the drugstore? It was a really good scene where he had to talk to the druggist and he was really embarrassed.
And the druggist probably knew his
for
parents.
A prophylactic and the druggist says, "Oh, okay, yeah, sure, here you go."
Yeah, interesting.
But that was 1972, right? And so that was still a controversial thing.
It's almost like, and then, okay, so we had the hippie thing, the free love, and then the Gen X, that the percentage that I looked up where 6% had no sex partner since 18. But it's a low percentage. I'm not using that percentage as like, oh, that's a big deal, because then we jump to where 15%, the next decade are abstaining, so to speak. So we had the 70s with the free love and everything. And then I think you had mentioned earlier, too, that there were a lot of TV advertisements. There was a big whole health program on AIDS. And what was the other one?
The STDs.
Yeah, the STDs, but AIDS there wasn't a cure. There wasn't any.
No.
So that scared a lot of young people, I think, from having sex, and then the pregnancy thing. Now we go to the Millennials, Generation Y. They were born in the 80s and 90s like our kids, but they're the ones now that I'm looking at, late 20s, early mid-30s. They don't want to get married. According to these statistics, they're not that interested in even cohabitating or living together. People have mentioned that Hollywood has created such a aura of, okay, number one, we see in movies now, I mentioned to you earlier, I really got sick of, like, I went through this summer when my dog was sick and I watched a lot of Netflix and, I had to take care of her. And every time I go, oh, that looks like a great movie. And it's a thriller or adventure. And the opening scene is these two gorgeous people, male and female, and they're in bed having sex. And she's usually, you can obviously tell she's having oral sex with him or he's having it with her. And their bodies are perfect, and they get up, and they're the best of friends, and everything's so cool. Well, impressionable teenagers who are already insecure about their bodies anyway and their
Mm-hmm.
maturity. To me, they're looking at that, and that's unattainable. And it was mentioned in one of the pieces
Mm-hmm.
that I looked up when I was researching this that Hollywood's created this illusion of unattainable perfection.
Mm-hmm.
I think to the overstimulation of, if you're getting sex at 11, 12, 13, 14, going to the movies with your parents. I've been with parents who don't object seeing a sex scene with their 12 or 13-year-old,
Mm-hmm.
or even 10 or 9. They go, well, they don't know what's going on. But
Mm-hmm.
on some level, I think they do.
Mm-hmm.
But the point is that overstimulation. And then the piece that started me going on this, and it was one of the major publications, Time or one of the mainstream. And their point was that it's like these younger people are just burnt out on sex. And they usually mentioned in the article, could it be that Hollywood has shoved too much sex down?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, down their throats. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
That's just a horrible way to put it.
Well, it's not as maybe because of the controversy of it has pretty much gone away, and there was that kind of made it have more appeal, that it was controversial, and
But
that,
why
well, you
drop it
shouldn't
in a
see it.
movie where the sex has nothing to do with the plot is what bothers
Well,
me.
yeah, right. I mean, well, I saw so many movies like in the late 60s, early 70s where there would be just gratuitous nudity, and you're like,
Right.
okay, there's the nude scene, there's the woman walking around, and it's 1970 or whatever,
Right, right.
and but that was really stimulating, when you're 15 or 14
Sure,
or
but I
16.
like that word gratuitous when it's just. I mean, if it's part of the plot, and I've written, as you know, romance novels,
Mm-hmm.
and I like to say I don't write pornography. And my joke on when I was doing the cruise ship lecture thing, and I would always say, yeah, I believe in foreplay, but I also believe in 5, 6, 7, and 8 play, which
Mm-hmm.
means you drag it out.
Mm-hmm.
You want to increase that sexual frisson, that tension,
Mm-hmm.
without being too crude, too abrupt. And then,
Mm-hmm.
you finally, even I, when I'm writing them, I get to the point, would they just do it?
Mm-hmm.
Because you want to build that to literally the climax of the book and the romance, but it's done in a tasteful manner. And the reason it's even in my books is because it is about a love story, and it is contemporary. But when you're watching a movie that's about, let's say, growing daffodils or something, do you have to have the gardener and the and the
Right.
landlady or somebody having sex among the roses when it has nothing to do
Well, yeah, and
with the
so
plot?
I that's a good point. I'm not sure exactly. I mean, aside from trying to give people their money's worth and trying to give people as much
So
entertainment as
Hollywood thinks
possible.
people want
Yes,
sex,
right,
which is
right.
interesting because now you have Pornhub, and we've all.
Well, I think that's another factor. I think people have just been desensitized. That's a buzzword, but I mean,
but there it is.
But I mean, when
Yeah.
when you've got all these porn clips that last 4 minutes or whatever online, and it's just basically the sex act, and I mean that could be titillating too, but. When people see that, I don't know. Maybe they sort of say, "Well, I've been there and done that, and I saw that, and I don't necessarily want to put myself into something where it's just kind of a gratuitous, like I said, a quick act." And I've seen that so many times, and I'm bored with it, and and
interesting, yeah.
And then.
So is Hollywood?
I wonder, and then I wonder if people in their personal lives feel that way. And the other thing is too, and this goes back a long time. I mean, even when we were like the 60s, 70s, but in having sexual relations, maybe that means more now than it did before. It was
Good
just
point.
like I don't know. Unfortunately I was in that generation of the 70s. Go into the, not necessarily a disco, but of the Fern Bar type place, the pickup place, and where it was and people were like that. You meet
looking
somebody,
for Mr. Goodbar.
Well, yeah, and you'd see someone attractive, and then you'd say, you end up at their home and you just met them a couple hours before, a few hours before, or whatever, and you've had some drinks and stuff like that, and then it was a one night stand,
Mm-hmm.
and then you go feel guilty, and then you go home, and then maybe a couple days later you go back to the same bar, and you might even see the same person.
Do you feel guilty because you just treated it as a one night stand?
Yeah, I felt guilty, like, oh my God,
You used her.
I did.
Something?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I went, and I went with my desire, and I got what I wanted, and now I feel lousy because that's kind of a lousy thing to do.
And also, you don't feel anything left over.
No, you feel like
you're done with it. It's like,
right,
yeah,
right.
It's not like you're going. I can't wait to call her tomorrow, and I want to.
Well, and then it would sometimes you ask her out for a date, but then after you've already done that, and then you try to get another date, sometimes it's like, you know what, we did it, like, we kind of have a relationship within about like 4 or 5 hours. We had a whole relationship, and
I get it.
I don't want to see you again. Or then unfortunately for a guy, it's true. You get what you wanted, and then you don't want any responsibility to have to
nurture something.
Bring some roses or something to her, or take her out again. And you just went and did the same thing over again the same week. So, I mean, that was that era where it was quick sex and
what I think got sacrificed in that, if I could interject, I mean, I know and you're not the only one, and women do it more so nowadays. They use dating apps to go out and have a free dinner and have a night of sex, and they could care less.
Well, and I heard that it's the other way now, where it's the women are pretty much in control.
Yeah.
And it's the women who are aggressive.
Yeah, that's what I hear.
Yeah, right.
And I know a lot of young men, my son's age, because of my son's age. I think one of the things that's tragic about that, and it falls by the wayside, but not for that in particular, but even if you have met somebody and you're attracted to them, say you met them online and you go to dinner and you don't rush right home to the sack or jump in bed, but you do say on the second or third date, you've done the dinner, you blah, blah. What happens, and I read this many years ago, is that isn't a good way to start a relationship, because you lose the courtship element of it. And the courtship element is where you're exploring more about the person as a person, but also you're building up that 5, 6, 7, and 8 foreplay that I was talking about.
Well, right. And also you're getting to know that person more intimately,
and
it's not just a quick fix. And for instance, I've got to point out that point in time in the late 70s, early 80s, that was a short period of time in my life where I had that, and I didn't really have very many of those one night stands, but I remember I had one relationship where the girl was through with that kind of thing, and she said, okay, we're not going to have sexual relations until I feel like it or whatever. And then we didn't for like 2 months, and I thought that was a lot better. I mean, there was something more. You got to know somebody in
it would be more satisfying on another level. There's so many levels. You have the physical, the metaphysical, the spiritual, the emotional. If you're just a physical, one night stand, it's no different than, like you said, the thrusting, grunting, and like a little porn thing. You had your own little private porn thing, and you just, hopefully it wasn't videotaped.
Well, I mean, and some of it was bad too, because I remember this was another girlfriend I had, and I was at her house, and her roommate had some guy come in with this big hot rod.
Oh,
I meant hot rod.
Oh, you came in with this big.
This really loud engine car, and he put out, and then he took her in to her bedroom, and I was with my girlfriend in her bedroom, but we were just like listening. And then they had sexual relations, and it didn't last very long. And then he just went downstairs, and she followed him, and he turned on the engine in his car right away. I mean, it must have been 2 minutes, 3 minutes. And then she said, well, can we see each other again? And the guy goes, no, I don't think so. And then backed out. I mean, and that happened a lot. I'm sure that that happened a lot, and that was the kind of thing that I thought was, really out of line. Although I have to say there were a few times where I had that kind of thing where it was
Mm.
like, oh my God, I don't see any future with this person. All right, we
Hmm.
had relations, but I mean, there's just nothing's going to happen. Kind of
Right.
made a mistake
Right.
with this person,
Right.
you know.
Yeah.
Um,
I've had
but
relationships. I'm not even a one night stand person. But
right,
that even
I yeah,
so, they couldn't even the great sex wasn't enough to propel it. You know what I mean?
sure,
Yeah, you could
sure.
have the best monkey sex or whatever, but if that even that actually over time just becomes that, and it's if there's nothing else to support that,
Well, I mean,
or
okay, later. So
what do you do when you're not in a sex? See,
I
you've
think
got
with the
to
millennials weren't, and I'm kind of sounding, just off the top of my head, but there was a term called hooking up, right?
right. They still use it.
And that was just having it
Oh,
implied it was just a casual sex kind of,
you-
uh,
can I interject?
encounter. Yeah.
You know, the one I hate the most, which again, now we're talking about the differences between the decades and the generations, is, and I didn't even get it, but I'm going to just cut to it and rather than when I heard, and this just makes me want to throw up in the back of my mouth, the term these young guys use, well, I want to tap that.
Oh yeah, sure.
That is
Yeah,
so
yeah. Well,
disgusting.
that was
That's
common.
so,
That went back to the 60s, 70s,
I'd
and
never heard it.
I
Well,
don't
because now it's on TV,
not
see?
necessarily tap that, but that
Oh,
attitude, that viewpoint, which
oh.
is, and that was true too when I was like 21, 22, 23, or
I had
whatever.
to
And my
really think
friends,
about it, and then it hit me what they were talking about,
well,
and it
well,
was
my
just like, "Oh, really?"
back then it was like,
Ugh.
you got to be, if you want to be a real guy, a real
Mhm.
man, or whatever. I don't like that term, but if you want to be a guy's guy, you got to say, yeah. You wouldn't say tap that, but you said, yeah, I did her, and then I'm doing someone else, and it was like a big deal
Yeah, well,
if
they
you had a lot of uh, uh, a lot of sex partners, even though there was nothing there. It was like a guy. You're a guy
well,
if you
yeah.
did that.
And
I
then
mean,
there's sex addiction. I'm going to make a
uh,
note of that because that could be an interesting topic in the
sex
future.
addiction. Mm.
Yeah, like is that with the with yeah, like towards the younger generation, has all of this inundation and everything created some type
Hmm.
of a
Well,
sex addiction
porn
among
addiction
porn?
is
I
a
hear
big
is
problem.
horrible.
That's it's so prevalent and so easy to find. And
But sex
uh,
addiction, I think, is different.
oh, you
It's
mean like with
I've been with
partners, not
someone who was a sex addict, and there's just nothing uh, you
so
can do.
they had a lot of partners. They would just
Oh,
go from partner to partner.
they need to keep uh, conquering, so to speak,
Oh,
or
okay.
it's not pornography. It's a whole
Oh,
different.
dominating a
No,
woman.
the idea of the seduction, and I
Oh,
can get
okay.
any woman, and
Yeah,
but
right,
we'll talk
right.
about that another time because
Yeah.
we haven't even gotten to what our talking points were. Well, we've kind of covered them. How back to the television, and you know what? It was so interesting. The minute I said to you, "Oh, there was a code, the Hayes Code," you knew exactly
Oh, the
what I was
Hayes
talking
Code.
about.
That was
So,
from the
from the
early 30s because I
he
mean
was the
people.
postmaster general
Uh,
under President Taft, was it? I couldn't tell
well,
you. But,
it would have been
oh,
Hoover
Hoover.
to Roosevelt. I'm not sure. I should know that.
Whoops. So
But
much for my history. But
what's interesting is that
they had a
they
code
had a code, and you
because
couldn't
the
say things. And then you can go and on Google, you can Google some pre-code movies. Go pre-code movies, and
like
they
the
were
20s and 30s, the
the
talkies,
late
or this
20s. Yes,
silent, and
right,
then
right.
the
Probably
talkies.
the late 20s, early 30s talkies, and they were pretty racy for the time. And I remember watching with my dad. My dad taught me about what the Hayes office was. And I was watching this movie called Alibi Ike with Joe E. Brown, who was a big comic actor in the early 30s.
Never heard of him.
And he said, "Well, hell, I guess I'm going to have to get up and go to have another go at it with that pitcher or something like that." And then I said to my dad, he said, hell, that's kind of interesting because that was before the Hays office
Oh yeah, you
started.
could not say God up and until the 70s, wasn't it?
Well, I mean,
but that finish your story.
Well, okay, so but and it was funny. I was surfing the net, as they say. That's an old that's an old term. I shouldn't say that. But it was interesting. There was a quick clip of Edward G. Robinson, famous for Little Caesar, and this was just like a couple of years after his Little Caesar, and it was a clip of a movie that he was in, and he was telling these two people, a man and a woman, in like his living room, about all the interesting paintings he has, and they pointed to one, and it was an abstract painting. Mm-hmm. He says, "Yeah, now isn't that a great painting? Do you remember? Have you seen a painting like that?" And the guy's sitting there, yeah, not since I was still on cocaine. and that was like 1932. I mean, and then afterwards you weren't able
Coke
to say
was
that.
legal back then. It was in Coca-Cola.
Well, sure, but I mean, that was something that you couldn't say after the Hays office.
So the Hays, well, also, and that was established by this gentleman as a rating thing, which is where we got, which our readers listen to us, viewers may not know, because of cursing, mm-hmm. to the mature, mm-hmm. PG. Remember, mm-hmm. there was PG, and then that was PG-13, mm-hmm. and then the mature general audience was the general family one, the G.
Sure. Now
and then it was X or R, and then X, which brings me to when we get to that. Let's carry on with the Hays here for a minute, just to give everybody the background. And it was in the 70s. Jack, what was his name? Italian name, Jack.
Bob Guccione?
No. Actually, I met him once. What a story that is. Valenti or something.
Jack Valenti.
Yes, Valenti. He's the one that got rid of the Hays Code, mm-hmm. and established.
Sure. It was actually in the late 60s, they had this thing called this ratings system they called GMREX, which was
Spell that.
G for audience, G for general audiences, M for mature audiences, R for restricted. So you had to, I was,
18,
it
17
could be
plus.
17, 18, even 16, I guess. 17. And then X was nobody under 18.
Which even then it was considered pornography, X, right?
Well, yes, but then it was funny. The movies that were rated X back then are really tame. I mean, Midnight Cowboy was rated X.
I didn't know that. I wasn't allowed to watch it. I mean,
that came out in 69, and that showed a bare breast, and it showed a couple people kind of gyrating in bed, but it done in a comedic way.
Isn't sometimes illusion more sexy than the hardcore? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You just said maybe somebody just moving under the covers gives you a better idea than he's pounding her and she's screaming and they're both sweating, and yet their makeup's perfect.
Yeah, right.
Her mascara's not smeared. She's still got her lip gloss on. I find that pretty odd. But so the Hays thing, and then Jack Valenti, thank you for that, because I was drawing a blank. I don't have my notes. But so then they started moving the goalpost on those ratings. So first there was G and M, I believe, and R and X. And then it got to PG.
And they got rid of M. And it was PG, and parental guidance.
They got rid of M and went straight to R.
And then R, and then they had another different grade of R. It was NC 17.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, right.
What does the NC stand for?
And that was all... that's a good question.
Non-consent or...
I don't know, but it should be obvious. But I mean, the thing is, they all wanted to expand the audience for these movies, right? So they did, and so it would hurt a movie's box office if it went R. So they changed it to a less restrictive.
But they're still
rating than R. But then
they're still selling the same content.
You know what I mean? There were times when these movies where it was like, well, look, that's got to be rated R, and then they go back and they say, okay, what are we going to cut to prevent an R rating because our box office is going to go down. We want to do a PG-13. Remember, there was PG and then there was PG-13,
right. It was,
and then so they would actually go back and re-edit movies in order to prevent the R rating, or they would argue with the ratings people, don't make it an R.
That explains something to me, and I got to get this off my chest because this has bothered me. There are movies that I have watched, and it just something I'll pop in probably after we terminate this episode, where I wish I could use an example. There is no gratuitous sex, let's say, in the movie per se, and it's a movie you've watched with your children and so on and so forth. Well, then I'll see it again, and apparently it's the unedited version because you're going, holy cow. I don't recall seeing that when I first watched this movie 10 years ago. So in my head, I kept going, they knew they were going to get away with this all along. So they went ahead and filmed it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
I was doing the conspiracy thing that like this was a plan.
They brought it back when the rating system was abandoned.
Right. So they were filming sex scenes back in the 60s and 70s and all these movies, knowing that they would have to cut them, but probably in the back of their mind going at some point, we're going to be able to.
Sure, that happened. Absolutely, that happened.
That did happen. Well, see, I'm not so conspiracy minded. It was just something that, I just couldn't believe it was the same movie I'd watched, say, with my son 10 years ago. But then I've watched Game of Thrones with my son and my nephew. You've watched Game of Thrones, right?
Sure. That has full on.
I've had to leave the room. I'm just sorry. It was just too embarrassing for me to sit there with my son, his girlfriend, and my nephew. I just couldn't do it.
Well, it's still controversial now. I mean, what was that?
Sex scenes and
about a year ago, there was that series on Netflix with Jeff Daniels playing like this bad politician, this really corrupt politician.
Okay.
And he was trying to get his career back, but he had these people that were really sinister, people that hated him, trying to keep him out. And he, one of those people who hated him, said, "You know what? I'm going to have relations with your ex-wife." And that guy, and he didn't want that. Jeff Daniels' character didn't want that, and the guy succeeded in having relations with his wife, and he was there, and he said, "You know what? This goes back to back in the medieval times when I had the farmer's wife. I was able to steal his farm and everything like that." And this guy said that, and while Jeff Daniels is standing there, and this character has an erection that's completely in the frame. And then
that's been a good one.
And the guy ends up hitting him and killing him
because of his erection.
Well, no, but I mean, when the guy kept saying that about like, I had your wife, and I'm going to take everything away from you.
Oh dear.
And then the thing is, though, that was an erection, so that was just a couple of years ago, and that was controversial. I think it was cut in Great Britain or something. I'm not sure if the show. But that was a big. The worst part would be on a non-pornographic movie would be an erect penis.
I know that, and that's a good point because even I've pondered that. Like they'll show women. There was a lot of pubic hair in Game of Thrones,
right?
But for some reason, it's more shocking, more startling, more aesthetically, I guess, unattractive to show a man.
Yeah.
Even a non-erect, a flaccid penis or whatever, although they did that too in Game of Thrones. Although, then we have great art by the greatest masters of all time with mostly it's women breasts, that's a very popular.
Well, that's part of the beauty. Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's considered beautiful. And I guess the female form, but then female genitalia is generally covered, whereas a male is exposed. So
Right. But flaccid, not.
Right.
You don't see Michelangelo with a. You don't see David with a. No.
I wonder what David would think about that. Well, that might have gotten in the way of some things, if you think about it. But boy, we're having way too much fun with this. And we're trying to point out, or I'm trying to work my way through this, is so when the ratings got changed, that was like the leak in the dam, right?
Mhm.
Kind of, you could say it's a pinprick in the dam.
Yeah.
And then, so let's say that we could just roll all that up and you could do like me, kind of mildly conspiratorial, that my gosh, they must have known they were going to get away with this. See, because I remember it was in the 80s and I was raising my stepsons before Matthew. And we were watching TV back then. I don't even think we didn't have Cox. I don't know that we had cable. I think we had satellite or something. But you would be watching even a kid's show and then this blurry, you could see it was people having sex,
Mm-hmm.
but it was really, blurred.
Mm-hmm.
I actually called Cox or whoever and complained about it. I said, why are you doing this? These kids could possibly figure out what's going on.
Yes.
There was some lane, I wrote a letter, they wrote a letter back. There was some lane excuse about that. I don't remember.
Well, no, they actually liked doing that and they could get away with it because, there was kind of a snowiness in the picture.
Well,
but
they told me it was some technical thing and they were
right.
trying to.
They were getting away with it. It was close to sex.
Subliminal.
Full sex, but it was they could say, well, actually we're blanking it out, see all that snowiness there and the distorted picture, right. But they were doing that on purpose. That's what came out.
And there was a period of a time there, having raised the kids and then had my kid and my neighbors and everything, where you didn't have parental controls on TV. Like now with Cox or Amazon or Netflix, that you have to sign into your account. Is it you or the kid watching, and the parental controls and all that?
Right, if you want that. And remember, under Clinton, Bill Clinton, there was that V chip. Remember that? So we're going to put the V chip in your TV, and the V chip is going to be able to, prevent your children from watching sexual content. Yeah, that was a gimmick though, because he talked about it in his campaigns and stuff like that.
Yeah. So, and there were times too back in those kids now are in their late 40s, but even if you were surfing the channels to go, this is after the fuzzy thing. This is when we were getting cable and all the different channels were on there. Right. And there were some pretty racy channels. They were, I guess, sex that you didn't have to pay for or anything. They were on there. So you could be scrolling with your kids looking for something and there's that movie. Even see how fast you could get.
Well, I mean, if you had like a premium channel.
Yeah.
And they all got mixed up with the other channels and then you were going through your channel surfing.
Subscribed to any of that, but there were still some pretty racy. So I guess the whole point of this episode is, again, and it's only a portion. So we are going through the different decades and the different millenniums, the Gen X, the Boomers, the Gen Y, and there's so many
different generations.
Different generations. And we've got a lot of material because when we get in another episode into slang, and the roots, the derivation, the derivatives of those, and how they've changed. And there's just and up to emojis and things like that, where the happy face came from. Remember where Have a Good Day came from? Some hippies started that back in the 60s.
That's the
Everybody
60s,
started doing it.
Right.
So in other words, these statistics about the decline of
sexual activity.
It's
really interesting. You would, as we were saying, you think that there would be a lot.
Could it be burnout or overstimulation or so? Because I've heard even my son and his friends, we're just kind of sick of seeing it.
Yeah.
It's like I was trying to watch this movie and then so I know it, and to me it's kind of a loss of innocence, not so much that these children are exposed to me too soon to sex. They should still be playing using their imaginations, but imagination plays a big role in sex because they say your greatest sex organ is your mind. So I can think back when I first kissed a boy, nobody knew, and it was, oh my gosh, and all that, there was just so much going on around there, the first time anybody, But these kids, I think, are from what, 10, 11, just seeing people going right to it, right
Well,
at it.
and I think you're right. I think you're right. I
And
think
then
that
they're modeling, is that how you kiss somebody? So when they go to first kiss somebody, say it was, do I dare name movie stars? Whatever, somebody sexy, Brad Pitt, Jolie back in the day. But they're adults and they're doing the biting the upper lip and the tongue. You know what I mean? So these kids, that's what they see. So then they feel compelled. They can't find it on their own. Does that make any sense? They
well,
can't get the
I mean, I think that these kids. This is just my speculation. That these kids, even at a young age, it was so easy to take your smartphone. Especially
yeah.
there would be some kid whose parents allowed them to have a smartphone too early. Like I didn't allow my daughter. I think she was 10 or 11 or 12 or something.
Gee.
And but then she had other friends that, oh, since she was 8 or 9 she's had a
Yeah.
smartphone. And then you just turn do a quick Google search or Safari search or whatever, and you'll come up with a pornography site. And so they saw that. I think there was a kind of a rejection of that. I think the kids started seeing that and they go, you know what, that shouldn't be doing that. And my parents don't like it, but I kind of don't like it either. And so I think that maybe desensitizing, that's a buzzword, as I've said, but
No,
I
I
think
have
that
to agree
people
with it. But,
I think people kind of even reacted against that.
hmm
And so
I didn't even know what Pornhub was a couple
uh,
of years. No, I didn't. I hadn't even heard of it. Don't ask me why. Oh, I was on a road trip for
oh,
I
okay.
don't know. The whole world just passed me by, and yeah, and I was on a plane or something, and the guy next to me was getting into Pornhub. But
Oh, really?
oh
On a
yeah,
cell
I've been.
phone?
Speaking of which, this is kind of off the subject, but on my way back from the East Coast on the road trip with Trixie, we were in Taos, and I was sitting really cool restaurant. That place was awesome. That's where Kit Carson has his house. I don't know if you
Hmm.
knew that.
Hmm.
But I'm sitting at the bar, and it's the second night there. I've been a guest in the hotel, and they know me. They know Trixie, and the guy sitting next to me. I'm not kidding. Right next to me, I'm ordering food, and I just glance over. He's got his phone wide open. It was the most obscene sex act. I just I couldn't help it. And he just kept watching. It
Hmm.
was like he just didn't
Hmm.
even. I
Hmm.
mean, it was shocking. At
Hmm.
first, you go, "Whoa, what is that?" And I didn't want to, but
Hmm.
he's right here. It isn't like he was 6 feet away and I was spying on him, so I thought that was strange. But
Hmm. Hmm.
so we are gonna wrap this one up with the bottom line of uh, we could even get a little bit crazy here and go, well, where do you think this is going to be in another generation, another 10 years? Are we not going to have sex? Are kids not going to,
Hmm.
young adults? Are they?
Well, there might be it might shift back to
Old
a lot
fashioned
of
morals
gratuitous
and
sex or
oh, I
old
got these
fashioned
things.
morals. Maybe it's going toward that now. But yeah, that's a good question. I think that this desensitization is going to continue. That's what I think. I mean,
Why did
people,
they do it in the first place? Why did Hollywood even have to start doing that?
because they thought it was entertainment and they thought that people demanded uh, a sex scene. I mean, like we were saying, in the
I
early
never found
'70s,
anybody who demanded
it
a
was
sex scene.
well. I mean, it was almost like mandatory, right? When you saw a movie in 71, 70, 71, 72,
Hmm.
73, there would be a woman would be naked, really quick, and then it was just like a woman walking down in a pasture or something, and she's naked, right? And it's just like
Hmm.
I saw these movies, and it was like, okay, there's the nude scene,
Yeah, so
Jeez, I
maybe
mean,
if they wanted to, you could say, well, they were trying to be artsy, but I don't,
well, titillating,
well,
because
titillating is
people.
fine, but I mean, there's a lot of titillation around today anyway, which is another subject I want to talk about at some point in a future podcast
Mhm.
about how cleavages have changed and what effect it's had. But we've been going on here for almost, wow, 50 minutes,
Mhm.
and we were trying to keep these to half-hour segments, but this
Mhm.
is our first test. We may not even publish it, right?
Well, I think we should publish it.
Okay, doke. Well, I'm on your side. Wait till we watch the review or the rewind. That'll be interesting. I'm Christine McKellar from Las Vegas. Here, we're just reporting everything from our home base.
I'm Jeff Burbank, and actually, she lives in Henderson, so I live in Las Vegas.
Stop it. Now I'm going to have to move. You know, that I got to say, though, I am renting an apartment now because I sold my house 3 years ago. What I don't like, I mean,
she's a rich woman now.
So. No, but I don't have to pay a mortgage and all that.
Yeah, yeah. That's nice.
But what I don't like, and I do love Henderson. Henderson is just jamming. I mean, did you see what they're going to do? That's another thing. No free advertising. What they're building on Water Street now. There's a new restaurant coming. New restaurants. It's amazing what's happening. But what I don't like, I actually lived in Paradise. That was the county that I lived in, Paradise.
Oh, sure, right.
Yeah,
right.
not Clark. Yeah, and so I could always say I lived in Paradise. But what I hate is when instead of I used to always, like, if I signed off on anything or a letter or something, I would just go, you know where your address is? I'd go LVNV and my zip code. Well, now I have to write out Henderson.
Yeah.
It's just like, this is no fun. There's no glamour. So I'm going to have to step up to it. This is Christine McKellar reporting or broadcasting from Henderson, Nevada. And we'll be back with more podcasts, and we're open to suggestions and comments. So please feel free when we post this. There'll be a section where you can give us comment, input, feedback, whatever you want. So have a great weekend.
Bye.
Bye.